Hey, Spencer Scott Holmes here, telling you all about our brand new podcast, Analog Legends, presented by Old Man Orange. This is a spin-off of the Via VHS show that me and Wes Younger did, where we go through and we talk about the retro good times, nostalgic past things that we truly enjoyed, and just have a whole lot of fun reminiscing. So let's jump on in.
So welcome to the very first official episode of the Analog Legends podcast. I'm Wesley, along with Spencer Scott Holmes. And if you follow Via VHS, you know who we are. And we're just trying something new out. You know what? It's hard watching a movie every week. I'm going to start doing some little, baby reviews on the side. And this just kind of gives us, it's just going to be so much easier for us to do. And this is kind of a fun hangout podcast where we have like a theme and we have like a topic, but we're really just hanging out and talking, which is really what we like to do anyway. And it just gives us an excuse to have ADHD and talk about nostalgia, which is really what we like to do.
Well, it's funny. My buddy, I had Jack Foster on one of the Old Man Orange podcast, a couple episodes ago, and he makes comic books and so on. And he brought this up with podcasting. He's like, asked as a question. He's like, is podcasting like the new kind of like hangout? Like, like when you get together with your friends, but instead now you get together on a podcast. You hang out, you have a casual conversation, or maybe you talk about a topic or something like that, but it's really no different than hanging out back in the day, but you're just doing it now either over the internet or, like on StreamYard and all that good stuff. I'm like, that's kind of what podcasting is. It is like the hangout in a sense. And in fact, for myself, I know this is the hanging out I do is podcasting.
Yeah, it's pretty much too. I would say this is my social life at this point with kids and everything. I have people I talk to at work and things like that, but in terms of outside of the family, this is pretty much it. So, but I like it. I like this. And, what's cool about podcasting is eventually you find like-minded people to collaborate with. And then, we started podcasting together. I invited people to do an episode of Via VHS, and then you're like, hey, I'll do Air Force One. I didn't know you from Adam. I didn't know who you were. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And that's how we met. And so we've been podcasting ever since and doing Via VHS, which has been difficult to do. Just because of the movie watching thing and both of us syncing up our schedules, and it's tough, but this is going to be light work, less editing, more fun.
Yeah, and then there's not that thing of like, oh, I got to get this 2-hour movie in, plus special features, plus read all the trivia. You don't think about it, but like it does kind of add up because it just sounds like, oh, I'm just watching a movie, but then you got to add in the other stuff to it and so on like that. And sometimes I can just fill up a week a little bit more than one would think.
Well, it's also difficult when you're watching garbage that you don't want to watch, because like I'm still going to be doing that. I'm still going to be watching movies, but I can watch it on my own pace and I can watch what I want to. And because we are always trying to find things that either one of us haven't seen, or like, there's some nostalgic element to it. But yeah, it became, we would watch things that sucked. It was really laborious for me to get through. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to watch this movie anymore. And so, and there's been some good ones I didn't even want to finish watching. So,
well, sometimes it just depends on what kind of mood you're in and so on, like that too. And sometimes even a genre, you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's like one of those ones, like if you're just not feeling it, even if you really like it, it could be like one of those movies too that you actually like, you would consider one of your favorite ones. But sometimes if you're just not at that right, mindset, then it kind of feels like, you're just not all in.
Yeah. There's definitely more control of it when, you can just watch what you're in the mood for. And that's kind of nice. And, double up movies sometimes. But Analog Legends, we're going to, we have like a huge list of nostalgic topics, top 5 lists, top 10 lists, bigger retrospective ideas, like things on like, the shopping malls, and the downfall of the shopping mall and the, what it was like, its popularity, or, things that like 90s Saturday Night Live, 80s TV theme songs. So we got like a huge list of stuff. Tonight we're just kind of talking about, as an intro episode, like the things that we miss most from the analog era. And for us, the analog era is the late 80s through, I guess, when it ended. So,
Yeah.
you know,
I throw 70s in there, and then obviously we weren't in the 70s, but there was so much stuff sitting around my house growing up as a kid from the 70s that a lot of it was very relevant to me because it was only 10 years prior, and you had older things sitting around, you had TVs, you had things like Simon and games like that, and so there was a lot of 70s stuff just still sitting around the house. So I always felt like I was still pretty attached to that decade as well too, even though it's past the time I'm even born. But
yeah, like I mean, for me myself, I remember very little of even the 80s, but I had 70s stuff around, I had 80s stuff around, and since we're kind of like always in that world of nostalgia, listening to older music, watching older movies, looking at older physical media, it's it's definitely fresher in our minds than most, I would say. So, you kind of develop a really keen sense of what is different, what you miss and what you don't miss and what's better. And some things that sometimes, and you'll see this with my list that I put together, sometimes the things that are better are also worse. You know what I mean? Like some things areas where we've progressed, like things that have made our lives better, but we've also lost a lot, So there's a lot of things like that. But I mean, I don't know. The 90s for me mostly is, when I think about it, the analog era is mostly the 90s for me. When I grew up, because that's, I would say Super Nintendo to N64 is pretty much the best way to describe like my key area of nostalgia.
Yeah, that tells a lot right there when you say it like that. For me, it's like definitely 90s for sure, but like, boy, even in like the 90s, like growing up, I so wanted to be in the 80s so hard. Like, throughout the 90s and 2000s, that's all just because I'd watched so many 80s movies, 80s music, and all that stuff that like almost almost too nostalgic for like the 80s and so on like that. It always kind of reminded me of there's that movie, that Woody Allen movie, Midnight in Paris and whatnot, and that's all about pretty much Owen Wilson's pretty much playing the Woody Allen character, but like the whole thing about that movie is just like super nostalgic for like a time period that you wish you could have lived in, and then in the process you do kind of realize, as though as cool as it is, the time that you actually are alive is just as cool but in a different way.
That's true too. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I will say this. I want to make this clear if we're going, like, this is not going to be like a couple of like zennials, shitting on every. Yeah, no, I don't want to be that. Like, I don't want to shit on like, the current generations or future generations, or, we had it better and these are the soft ass little snowflakes. Nah, you're not gonna. That's not what I'm interested in doing. But I mean, because every generation is going to think their generation is the best generation. But it is interesting to hear why, when I listen to Gen Xers, like what they like about the 70s and 80s, and listen to our generation talk about what we liked about the 90s and early 2000s. If you even like the early 2000s, which I struggle with sometimes. Yeah. But it's, I definitely don't want to shit on Gen X. I mean, sorry, Gen Z. No,
nobody shits on Gen X. Gen X is like the generation that just sort of slid by. Boomers get thrown on the bus left and right. Our generation gets thrown on the bus. They even gave us a crappy name. But Gen X, just like that is never brought up in conversation.
No, they
people don't worry about Gen X for voting. People don't worry about Gen X for buying. I don't know why. It's just like they don't make it. They don't make problems. Nobody's complaining about them like Gen Z. Yeah, it's such a weird. They just skated like out of that, and they're like, it's never brought up. Whenever people bitch about something, they never bitch about Gen X.
No, it's kind of true. It is kind of true. I mean, our generation definitely gets, shit on, but I think it's more of the people who are in the older part of, the younger part of the millennials, because we call ourselves zennials. I mean, I think you and I both kind of identify equally as much with Gen X as we do, the millennials. So it's
And I always look at generations like there's actually a part 1 and a part 2. And I think you have to look at it that way because they make them like a 20-year block. And let's be honest, 20 years is like way too long to like say all these people are kind of the same. So I always say there's part 1 and part 2, you know, and a lot of times part 2 is the stereotype one. Part 2 mostly, even like Gen X, the part 2 is the stereotype because everybody forgets about like the Dazed and Confused era. They don't consider that necessarily the, you know, Gen X, but that technically is Gen X as well. You know, so then you get part 2, which is what everybody kind of thinks of as like, you know, Kevin Smith kind of era, like that sort of stuff, you know, and it's the same thing with us too, is I think we kind of fall in that early section of, you know, Gen Y. I'm going to use that word because I like that one better. And in that one, we have that more relation to Gen X. And we're like, in a sense, I call it the before the internet, and also before the internet was or before the computer was necessarily in the house. Because realistically, a lot of us were born at a time period, unless you had kind of either parents who were either in the computer business or just had money, you know, the computer wasn't just sitting in the house. Like we see in some, you know, 80s movies.
Yeah, like we watch War Games and the kid had like a whole goddamn like war room.
You're like, it's like he has like a $10,000 setup back in the day, $10,000. So that's like a $20,000+ setup today.
Yeah, that was no. I look at it as when it comes to computers is before going to high school without social media. I remember the last and we're talking like the last month of high school. I heard somebody mention something about MySpace.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I literally skated out by the skin of my teeth. Like I missed social media in school completely, which I'm so thankful for. And that is the one thing I'll say about the later generation. They had it rough because that's, you know, that whole dynamic has to be a pain in the ass for just your social life. But unless you have a really good one, I guess. But we missed out on that for the most part.
Yeah. It was all like Yahoo Instant Messenger was kind of the big one.
Yeah, I didn't even have that.
I didn't either. Well, I rebelled against. I was always. I'm gonna say this. When I was growing up as a kid, I was that person like, oh, there's something new. Well, fuck that. I'm not gonna be a part of that. I was like bad, like almost like not in a good way. It's like one of those ones. I remember when digital music came out, I was like, damn the hell if I ever have digital music, it's gonna be CDs and cassettes all the way till the grave. You know, and then lo and behold, next thing you know, I was like, oh, you know, Spotify is kind of nice. Let's be honest.
Yeah, Spotify is nice.
You do get to that point where you're like, I get it, but there was a period where like, yeah, I was not jumping on any new bandwagon.
No, Spotify's great if you have ADD.
Oh yeah, I think it's great for the fact that like it's, you know, back in the day, you know, you were lucky to have like the greatest hits of like a couple bands because that was all you could really afford. But you always kind of wish, you know, you could go out and get like all the albums or something like that. But you knew that was not going to happen. And Spotify's like, oh hey, did you want to listen to all like 15 other bonus albums of like, you know, Ted Nugent? Like yeah, I do. I just said Ted Nugent's greatest hits. That was what I lived off of.
If you want to know Spencer. You know Spencer now.
Wango Tango Deluxe.
Wango Tango. Is it Wango? Is it Tango? Yeah. But well, let's jump into our list because we both made a list of things that I think top 5. We did top 5, right?
Yeah, 5.
I was hoping you did 5 because I did 5.
I'm glad. If you would have said 10, I would have been like, well, give me a moment.
Yeah, no, 10's a little rough, but I have it as top 5 things we missed from the analog era, the things that we specifically miss. I didn't ask you to do this, so you might not have one, but I did have one, just like a bonus one, like you know, just miss the cut thing. I don't know if you have anything like off to the side.
You know, I don't, but during this process, something might come up that will strike my mind, and I'll write it down.
This is something that's been a pet peeve of mine lately, and I was just thinking today as doing this, like I don't remember that being a problem when I was, you know, growing up as much. It was around, but wasn't taken as seriously as it was today. And I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but just the relationship with astrology. I think in the 90s was way healthier.
Uh-huh.
Because like even though people read horoscopes and stuff, people would like read their horoscopes, and people would like even they even had like hotlines you could call for like psychic help and stuff like that. And people would like read your tarot cards. You had Miss Cleo and all that stuff, and that Sylvia Brown lady that would go on Montel and like, you know, get into a bunch of trouble because she told somebody her kid was dead and they actually weren't. Things like that. But man, like people are so casual about it today. About their like like the, because somebody at work was recently, so my boyfriend's a Taurus, and you know how that is. Like, no, I don't. I don't. I don't know how that is. But I don't.
I was gonna say, the way that I always think about it is there's that line in Gran Torino where Clint Eastwood sit down with the dog and he's reading the newspaper and he reads like the astrology thing, and at the very end of it he goes, "What a crock of shit." And that's just kind of how I've always looked at it, like the way that Clint Eastwood sort of says it there.
Yeah, it is really. It's just people like, I feel like people take it really seriously now. Like, not even. I don't know. It's the casual nature in which people just, you know, put that into a conversation like it's a factual thing. Like, you know how them Tauruses are. Yeah, I don't.
I feel it's one of those ones, if you kind of have fun with it like a Chinese fortune cookie and you don't take it like this is going to change your life tomorrow, like I think it's one thing. And
that's fun.
If you just play with it fun, but when you start to go serious into it like it's a science, that's when it gets scary, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you got to pump the brakes on that.
Yeah. I don't even know what months are with. I know I'm a Capricorn. That's all I know.
I know I'm a Scorpio, and I think that's just cool because it's a scorpion. So I
cool.
like, I've always thought that was cool. It's like, cool, I'm a scorpion in that one, and then I get to be Year of the Dragon. I'm pretty pleased with how that all panned out.
I get a fucking rat. I'm Year of the Rat. And I only know this because of Chinese menus.
Yeah, well, they're there to educate you.
Yeah, Year of the Rat. But I think my son's a dragon. I might be wrong.
It could be, yeah, because it's every 12 years. So
that would make. Well, no, I don't know. I have to look it up.
Then too late to calculate any math right now.
Yeah, but that's just my one buffer one.
That's your buffer one? Okay, I didn't know if that was your buffer or your number one. I was like, what's going on? And he's like, that astrology thing. It's like,
No, that's just like one. I just like a subtle one that I've noticed lately. That's like, I don't remember people like taking it that serious. I know it was around. I remember even in movies, people talking about it. I remember seeing it in the newspapers. I remember, but it's just like, man, I feel like it's like people like take it very seriously now.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff, that spiritual stuff, I guess, I don't know, is gonna put it in a broad category, but I think that's coming back kind of strong.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
it's that thing. I kind of heard someone talking about this recently, but they're like, you know, since there's like a decline of like old school religion, people are now going. They're turning other things, I guess, into like a full on religion. I mean, the perfect example is the woke thing. We don't need to go any farther than that.
Yeah,
that's pretty much become almost a religion in itself by this point. And I think the same thing kind of goes with the spiritualness too. There's a lot of people that's where they kind of they go down that path, whether it be kind of witchy, whether it be kind of earthy, you know, whether it be all that stuff's fine and dandy as long as you don't get too weird about it. I think that's the key thing. You just can't get weird about it. You can be into it. You can be into anything you want. There's nothing wrong there. You know what I mean? If you want your religion to be, you know, the religion of Superman, that's fine by me. That's all about truth, justice, and the American way. It's a good way to live. But,
I agree.
You know what I mean? But if you think Superman's gonna catch you when you fall out of a building, you got another thing coming.
Yeah. But was it?
No matter how hard you pray.
Well, yeah. Especially, I'm not going to shit on Superman like I like to, but was it Australia, I think, that had to tell people to stop changing their religion to Jedi or Sith?
Oh, well, you could, because I know, like, in America, you could put Jedi down, like, if you're in the military and you want to put that on, like, your dog tag, you can literally put Jedi. And I think it's even more badass if you put down Sith, let's be honest. Like, you know, when you catch some guy that's got Sith written on there, you know, something's going down.
Yeah, it's not going to go well for you. It's not going to go well for you. Well, you start with your fifth. I want to hear your fifth one. We'll go down the list. I don't know if you have them in order, but you just start whichever one.
I just sort of did the thing where I just wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as they sort of came down my memory. So I'm just going to kind of start from the top and just go the way that I kind of went. And my number one of things that I miss that's sort of nostalgic from the good old analog era is magazines. And I'm hitting
that's
magazines
good.
kind of hard because right now, Game Informer is coming out with their very last issue. And now, granted, Game Informer was never, ever my favorite gaming magazine. I just sort of always kind of had it because it kind of came along with the GameStop card.
Yeah.
So on like that. And the fact that I kept getting it because it was like the only big magazine. There's some like, because there's a few like I guess you would say indie magazines that are out there still. You know, like I have one called Nintendo Force that pretty much tries to do the Nintendo Power thing. So they kind of keep that tradition alive.
Love Nintendo Power.
Yeah, Nintendo Force really does like they're awesome. They do the exact same thing, but they're like an indie magazine, so it's kind of you can't really say it's like an official one. Where Game Informer is like literally the total final like official big magazine to go. We're done, and it's funny because they had like only like 4 months ago they had like, hey, do you want a deal for like 2 years for like $35 in print and whatnot? I'm like, fuck yeah, give me that. I'm just gonna get it anyways. I'm gonna ride this wave to the very end. And then it was like 2 months later, so they're like, oh god, you know what? We're going under, so we have to give you a refund and so on like that. And I'm pretty sure what happened is they sent that thing out because I never saw them do something like that before. It just used to always be like, you just resubscribed your GameStop thing and they gave it to you. But I think they were just testing the waters. They're like, let's see how many people actually want this magazine still. And I think what happened is not enough people subscribed.
Yeah, I agree.
And they're like, you know what? This was either a yay or nay moment. And so, boom, that's done. And, you know, so that's the end of the video game magazines. And I even say other magazines, too. The other big one is that's a really bummer that doesn't exist anymore is workout magazines like Muscle and Fitness, Flex. All those magazines are 100% gone. It's so weird to think that none of those things exist anymore.
It's, or they've moved online and it doesn't have the same. It's not the same thing. It's just not. It's Sports Illustrated for me. I guess it's been about a year now when it went out. Well, I think it was earlier this year. Yeah. And they finally decided they were just, closing shop. I mean, I knew that was coming. Like if you would have asked me, do you think Sports Illustrated will be around for much longer? I'd be like, oh God, no. But I never thought about it. And so when they said they were, going under, I'm like, oh my God, like, that was a huge deal for me. Anytime like the Tar Heels like did something, they got their own cover, or like Charlotte Hornets, or they were almost fucking never on Sports Illustrated. But Michael Jordan, any of those, like I was so excited. I used to collect some of them, and I mean I guess they're probably more valuable now, but that one really broke my heart because I loved Sports Illustrated. And almost all the people I read, like maybe like Peter King, for example, I could still go read their stuff. It's still there. But having that piece of paper in your hand, like with somebody on the cover, it felt like a big deal. And then when you're on a digital cover or of something, it just feels like a fucking social, like an Instagram post at this point. So it doesn't feel, important.
Well, the even bummer thing though is with a lot of those ones is they don't even have digital versions anymore. It's like Muscle and Fitness. I mean, they'll have like articles like online, but they don't have like even like you can't even just get the digital version of the magazine. I don't think Sports Illustrated there's even a digital version either. I think it went just to straight like articles or something like that online.
Yeah, it's hard to. I think it's not even. I think it's a shell of itself pretty much now. Like they laid everybody off, and it still exists, but it's not Sports Illustrated. And it might still be in print as we speak. I'm not sure how that happened, but I know earlier this year, I think it was, they laid pretty much everybody off, and that's just like, man. But yeah, Game Informer now too. I loved magazines too. I didn't think about that, but that's a really good one.
Well, it's for me too, especially as a kid. Like my real big magazines was Game Pro and Nintendo Power were my two big go-to ones. I also like Tips and Tricks quite a bit too, and there's some other ones that I'm nostalgic for, but those were the main ones I did have. And then also Muscle and Fitness and Flex once I started getting into like working out. Like I used to just take them from the gym. That's how I got my copies a lot of times too, And then I also used to subscribe to like Guitar World and so on too when I played a lot of music, and even like I used to. There's like ones like Video Maker, like all that stuff, and it was just fun. It's like back in the day it would be like $15 or $20, and you got a year's worth of magazines, it felt like a great bang for your buck of content. You know what I mean? You're like, geez, that's the price of like 2 books, but instead I'm going to get like magazines for the entire year. Awesome.
Man, gosh, that you mentioned it. I used to read, like, here's a good example for we'll move on, but I think we could do a whole episode on this, honestly.
Yeah,
but like,
it's probably too broad of a topic.
yeah, well, no, it's a good topic though. But like, I used to love Rolling Stone magazine.
Yep.
And I used to read it all the time, and so it still exists. But here's what they do now, and I fucking loathe Rolling Stone for this. They'll come out with a list, like, and I remember them doing this when I subscribed to the magazine, and I used to look forward to these lists. So now it's been like 20 years, so they're updating like their top 500 best songs, top 500 best albums, best guitarists, and they'll purposely do things to make them ridiculously and audaciously stupid as possible to get clicks. Like they, I think it was the top 500 songs they had. I can't even remember the name of the song, but the Missy Elliott song. It's your bit yet, like whatever that song is.
Yeah.
I mean, I like that song. I do like that song. But the 8th best song of all time. I mean,
yeah, forget about it.
Led Zeppelin has like bottom catalog songs that are better than that. And that's not even, I don't even feel like it's even objective. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, they've just become a shell of themselves too. And now, you know, their bread and butter's gone. So they're living in the internet world. And that has changed, because even if they have digital versions of the magazines now you're competing with everybody in the same space on the same phone. And so now you have to do things to get clicks. And it has completely changed the type of journalism that's there now. And it's just a shit show, and it sucks.
Yeah, it's a bummer. As I said, there is some indie ones that carry on strongly, but they can kind of target specifically to, you know, the people that want the magazines. It's like, as I said, I brought up that Nintendo Force one, but I still don't even get it. They only charge $5 an issue for that, and there's no ads. Like, I don't even know how they really technically do it. Like, it blows my mind every single time. I'm like, and they put out like a great thick quality magazine every 2 months. Comes with a poster, you know. You get all the good stuff, so it's like one of those ones. Got so many posters built up that I could like code about 3 more houses worth, because I've just saved from all the magazines I've ever had my entire life / movie posters and all that stuff. But yeah, long story short, I do just miss magazines. And just, yeah, I don't even care what I just, you know, it's like even you sit in the doctor's office and you just, oh, here's a Time magazine, or here's a National Geographic, or here's like, Popular Mechanics, even those ones, even though I know those ones kind of still are the few that do exist. But there's just something fun about a magazine, and just that, like, you just never knew what you really were going to get into. If you could read the articles, cool. But even if you just flip through and you're just going to look at the pictures, look at the ads, you know what I mean? Like, it offered a lot in one thing.
Yeah, I miss it. Tons. I remember getting for Christmas different, like I had ESPN magazine at one time, and Sports Illustrated, Rolling Stone. Like, I had so many of them, man. I can't believe I didn't even think of that, but that's a really good one. So for my 5th one, there's so many different directions I could go with this first one. I'm going to start with one that kind of keeps it in the vein of the things we've been talking about for years. Movie culture in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Movie culture in the 90s was extremely different for a lot of reasons. And some of these things will touch on things that are coming up later, but just how, what the internet has done with polarization, and just for the way reviews and the way we get trailers and the way fandoms are toxic and stuff now. I mean, you had some of that even with Phantom Menace and like the early chat rooms and stuff like that back in the day. But it was something special about going to a theater, and maybe you missed, something in your favorite magazine, Entertainment Weekly, about a movie that's coming out, or maybe you didn't get the newsletter, but you go to a movie theater and you see a trailer for something for the first time. And you're like, oh my God, this movie looks amazing. And you didn't know it was coming out. Mm-hmm. And that's amazing. The romanticism of going to the video store and renting something. Streaming's way more convenient. I understand that. And I love streaming, and I like digital stuff because I have a lot of digital movies.
Yeah.
But you can't communicate to somebody who's just used to Netflix what it was like when it wasn't readily available, and you had like a Friday or Saturday night and your family went, you and your mom or somebody went to the video store like after school. Like, oh, we're gonna rent a couple movies for this weekend, and like the rest of the day up until that night when you watch it, and the whole family gets around together, and you have pizza or something. Like it was a very warm, wholesome, good event, and just also the last thing I'll say about it for that indie movies or like art house stuff that would be considered another decade's art house stuff was not only profitable, but they were giving big budgets. Stuff like Tarantino and the Coen brothers and things like that. They were actually Miramax stuff. They were actually given like real money to make like high quality art films, and they were good. And so you were getting like big budget, I mean, even things like Fight Club, the things like that were making money and profitable. Movies were, it was the best decade for movies. I think 90s were the best decade. 80s were great, 70s were great, but I think the 90s as a whole was the best. And I just miss the romanticism of what it was. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, the 90s still had what I would refer to as movie magic feeling.
Yes.
Like it still felt magical. By the time the 2000s come and we start to get more to a grounded in reality, that magic starts to seep away. And it's not saying that there's not great movies in the 2000s. I love a lot of movies in that time period. But the magic kind of disappears, and it's not as much of a spectacle. Movies aren't nearly as big as they once were. Of course, we don't have all the extra stuff of the tie-ins, the extra, all the small things like that add up to a really big experience, And even speaking of even the video store, I showed you those pictures as I found a total operating video store in Nevada that was like 40 years going. And I was just like, and it wasn't like, because I felt like if that was in California, it would have been such like a novelty place. That's what they would have treated it like. Oh, how, quaint. They're here. Like, check out our this one was like, no. We've just been, people still like renting DVDs and Blu-rays and so on. You could tell, I mean, it's a farming town, so it's like, you could just tell it's like, they just didn't change, and they kept it there, and it was so cool. Still had all the posters in there. Still had a lot of the homemade signs that you can tell were made in like the 80s and 90s and so on. Like I took a picture, I sent you that Sega one, because it wasn't like an official Sega one. It was like somebody made a Sega with Sonic on there and everything like that to put for their Genesis collection, and yeah, just stuff like that. It was just like it was so cool just to see that it was just there, and it was normal. They didn't treat it like it was anything special. It's just, this has always been here, and we're still going strong. When I bought the movies, they literally wrote the receipt thing out like the old school days. It was like there wasn't like we're just gonna type it on the computer here. Like, no, the lady started writing it down, and then we had it like the copy paper where like you give one to me and she keeps the other one and so on like that. It was like, whoa! It was just like a blast wave of nostalgia right there.
It makes it more nostalgic, the fact that it wasn't treated as a novelty thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, that's crazy. It's like stepping back in time. I mean, there's the one here at Alamo, but it is set up to be very nostalgic. It's like, it's a theme.
Like they know what they're doing. Like this thing was just like, this is just, here's movies. What I mean? And it's not everybody. First thing they asked is like, "Oh, they have VHS." Like, no, it didn't have any VHS in there. There was just DVDs and Blu-rays. I mean, they were just going with like what was at the time everybody's using, and people are still renting DVDs and Blu-rays. So
that's crazy.
I just think it's so cool that that's going, and I feel in Nevada, I guess you can kind of pull it off, because some of those areas are kind of a little bit landlocked away from you aren't close to much, and I always think about like that stuff too. Is like, until things like Starlink and stuff come out, you were kind of like cut off from like the internet. You know what I mean? You just it wasn't just all there. I was kind of, it'd be interesting to know, like, in some of these like small kind of like little farm towns kind of throughout Nevada. I mean, it's probably like other places too, but it's just like, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what life was like, especially in the 90s. You know what I mean? Like in a total pre-internet era, where maybe if you're lucky you have satellite TV, but that might not be even true. You might just be off some antenna.
Well, there's that area in West Virginia where you're not, I think it's like a 30-mile, maybe a 60-mile radius. You're not allowed to have any type of technology, phones or anything, because they have these huge satellites or whatever. And so I've always wondered if those video stores there, because you can, that's the only way they can watch movies and stuff. But
yeah, exactly.
They have to be analog, like they're forced to be.
Yeah.
And I think even some analog stuff like radios and stuff they can't use because
Yeah, the frequencies.
it interferes with things. So, but yeah, I just miss what movies were, especially like now a movie comes out, like a Marvel movie comes out, and then you get the DC people bitching about it, and like, oh, Marvel sucks, and then everybody's making fun of the DC movies, which they should. And then and then like Star Wars is just, boy, they have, and I'm not even talking about the woke stuff. So I don't people that that's there, but it's even just that they've just driven it to the ground, and I don't feel like anything is sacred anymore. Like, and now that Bob Iger's back at Disney, oh my God, like they're doing a Toy Story 5. I'm like, you already fucked up making a 4. Like, you should have never touched that. Like, there's some things you should leave alone.
Yeah.
And they can't help themselves. They have no creative.
That money well is just, they're going to suck everybody dry as much as they can.
Yeah. And people are getting tired of it. People, want, different stuff now. It's just a mess. But yeah, I miss movie culture in the 90s. I miss the romanticism of it. I miss seeing trailers for the first time at a movie theater. I miss going to the movie theater all the time. But that's more of a lifestyle thing and less about the 90s. But anyway, so what's your next one?
So my next one is, this kind of relates in a similar vein, but I call it The Search. And what I'm talking about is almost in that somewhat pre-internet era. And even if the internet was there, it still didn't have like the power that it once did. But when you wanted to find a said movie, video game, book, comic, what have you, you'd take that notepad down and you'd write these movies. And then when you would go out to the store, you would scour and see if you could find stuff off your list. And, maybe you couldn't find it at one store, so you'd go to the next store, maybe go to the next store. But it made it kind of this like Indiana Jones journey of going out to find your physical media and also not knowing what to expect too, because sometimes you would run across things you didn't even know existed, but you found it out there in the wild. And that's what made that such a magical moment where, once again, like, if realistically, if you want just about anything, eBay will give it to you, for a price too, if, give or take on like what it's worth. But it's not like you're just going to find something and get that like, oh my gosh, here's this like rare movie I've been looking for. It's at a thrift store. It's like $2. Like, whoa. Like, you get that mind blowing moment where it's just, or something like, you even just go to a regular video store and you see this like version of a film that you've never seen before. Maybe it's a super special edition, things like that. Just the search. And I'll even say this, the other search that was always a big one for me too is the TV guide search. I remember you'd get the TV guide at the beginning of the month, and I would scour that. They'd have like a back section that had all the movies in there in alphabetical order that were going to play during the month. And so I'd find the ones I wanted to, and I'd highlight them and find the times that they played. And, sometimes it's a good time, or sometimes it's like, oh, it plays at 4 a.m. Thank you. But like, just the fact that like that search almost made the experience better. Like, once again, granted, yes, we live in the time where it's like, it's the best time ever if you need to catch up on anything. It's just all right there for the most part. And even if it's something like, the hardest thing to get is like, what, you had to spend like $15 to go buy it. You know what I mean? But it wasn't like you had to go out of your way. You didn't have to drive 3 hours to another town to see if that store had it, all that kind of stuff. But that search kind of just made an adventure out of collecting and discovering, and, in a sense, grabbing your great media of the comics, of the movies, of the video games, and so on.
I agree totally. I mean, that's why I think I collect VHS, is because I get to relive that. Because, oh man, I found, like, I just saw Iron Eagle. When we did the Iron Eagle episode, I'm like, I don't have that on VHS. I did. I just saw it down there, like, oh shit, I do have that. But I remember finding certain things on VHS. I'm like, oh my God, I've been looking for this, or, that's so exciting. And you don't have that anymore. And I could go on eBay and get it, but it's more fun when I go look for it and I bump into it like organically. But even compound that, and I'll throw this into the same thing, channel surfing, because I can't tell you how often I'll get on a streaming thing or like whatever, and I'll just, I want to watch that one day. I want to watch that one day. I want to watch that one day. And you're just looking at the cover and you don't know what's in that movie. I'm talking about the things you've never seen. I'm like, oh, I've been wanting to watch that since the 90s and I haven't watched it yet. Or, but then But I can remember back in the 90s, early 2000s, flipping through the channels. And that's how I saw Goodfellas for the first time. I remember flipping through the channels one night and like, what is this movie? It was Ghost in the Darkness, or, you know, different things like that. Or I remember watching the end of, I think it was Braveheart or something. It was on TNT. And my brother and I were watching the end of it. And we were talking about something, and we're only halfway paying attention to this movie that was on. And all of a sudden, like, it got really interesting because these paratroopers just stormed into the school and started shooting everybody. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And it was Red Dawn. And we watched the whole thing. But just being able to click on something in the middle of it, you're not just seeing the poster to the movie or just this little streaming thing that they have, the little graphic. You're seeing a part of the movie, and you're like, oh, what is this? You know, that's something I really, really miss. And that was part of the search too. It was just a TV Guide channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's just something special about that time period. And I also feel like, you know, that's almost another topic in itself. But like when you were flipping through TV and you catch a movie and you just start watching it, and it, you know, it's one of those ones that like you're kind of committed because it's like on the TV, you know, especially when you only had even so many channels or something like that. You know, this is just what's on at this time period. What are you going to do? Get up from the couch? Yeah, right. You're already here. You know what I mean? So you just would watch stuff that, like, nowadays you could easily just back out and go find something else. Or then you're just like, yeah, whatever. Let's watch it. Let's see what happens. And sometimes you discover some cool stuff in that time. And sometimes you'd even discover maybe the movie's not that great, but it might have some scenes and moments that are actually pretty awesome that you do kind of take in.
Yeah, I could definitely remember seeing a movie, finding it in the middle of it, and then getting interested in it. I'm like, I really wish I saw the beginning, and then stop watching it and then go rent it so I could see the whole thing. There was a few times I did that. I can't think of any specific movies off the top of my head, but I know I did that. So
yeah,
I think War Games. Actually, no, my mom showed me War Games, but I know there's other ones, but yeah, that's a really, really good one. The Search. So I'm going to give you one that you probably can't touch on that much. And I've mentioned it a billion times, and you're probably like, oh God, this again. But I really do miss it. I'm a huge sports fan. I think football was really, really good in the 2000s. And now I think baseball's about the same. I think it's actually better now with this, you know, whatever. Hockey was fun in the 90s. It was fun in the 2000s. But basketball, NBA, college and NBA was infinitely better in the 90s. And it's not because, I'm not saying the players were better, because people get mad about that. Like, oh, the 90s NBA players couldn't touch today's players. Well, everybody's always getting bigger, faster, stronger. And they've added all the European elements to it now. They got the Euro step, and like everybody, you got these 7-footers that can fucking shoot. Like all of them can shoot now. It's insane. They're all really, really good. But something about just the product in general of 90s NBA, the competitiveness, I think the flow of the game was way more interesting instead of people just chucking up shots on percentage. Like everybody shoots all these threes now, but it was way more interesting when it was like you watch like a 90s like Bulls versus Jazz series, or like even the Rockets, Knicks. I mean, it was really, really, really just intense, but also the uniforms were so cool. Like Michael Jordan, larger than life. Shaquille O'Neal. People forget how big Shaquille O'Neal was in the 90s. He fucking huge, man. Like Charles literally and figuratively. Charles Barkley. Like Charles was big. I mean, you even had like Scottie Pippen, the sidekick. He's getting his right card. Love Scotty. I mean, there's so many guys that like, you know, of
Rodman.
Rodman, love Rodman. And even in the 90s, the Charlotte Hornets, even though we weren't that great, man, it was a cultural phenomenon because the fucking teal, all of a sudden everybody had, even the Detroit Pistons switched to teal. I mean, they were red, white, and blue like forever. And they're like, oh, we're teal now because the Hornets were teal. And it was just such a cool era. The uniforms were amazing. All of them thought they could be rap artists. All of them. I mean, Kobe even did like had a rap, and he wasn't that bad. None of them were that bad, really. But it was just such an interesting time. And I think the players today just aren't as engaging. Like, I just don't, they're not as likable. Like, LeBron's not as likable. I've actually grown to actually appreciate him more lately. I'll be honest. But like Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, all these guys they whine half the time. And I just can't I'm just not as interested in them. And man, but those 90s players, man, there's just something about it.
And just the surroundingness of, 90s basketball. I mean, if you had a kids movie, you had to have a basketball scene in there. Well, hell, you got to have a basketball scene in even any kind of comedy or something like that. It was just like so embedded in the culture by that time period. And I think really what it was the buildup. Is of course basketball's always been there, but it felt like in the late 80s coming into 90s, it was like basketball's like, no, this is finally our time to shine, and we're going to make this sport be the 90s sport, And
it was.
Especially the video games, like, of course, NBA Jam. That's my favorite sports game of all time. Tournament Edition on Sega Genesis. It's my always go-to. I can always have a good time with it, especially if you're playing it with somebody else. Oh, it's amazing. You know what I mean? And, all the other variations too, of course, but yeah, there's something so special about just basketball in the 90s, and it's like heyday. That's truly what that is. That was just when basketball was just on fire, both on screen and in the video games. It's like, but it's just one of those ones like, yeah, I mean, who didn't play basketball in the 90s? I don't think I know somebody. I'd be kind of afraid if someone didn't play some form of basketball in the 90s. You know what I mean? Like, they were clearly missing out on something here.
Yeah, it was just, I don't know. It was such a huge thing. And when I was a kid, I thought it was mainly here. I think it was like big everywhere, but because of the Tar Heels, because of the Hornets, because Michael Jordan still had a big relevance here, I thought, well, it's really big here, but not big everywhere else. But no, it was huge everywhere in the 90s. And man, I really, really miss it. The Hornets, at least we got the Hornets back. Now they went to the Bobcats. Now they're the Hornets. They still suck, but they look good doing it. So
hey, there you go. That's half the battle.
That is half the battle. So 90s NBA, it was just shit. There was a whole trend on TikTok recently. We're done with the 90s. Well, fuck y'all, because the 90s was a shit in the NBA. So what's your next one?
So my next one is this is what I just kind of titled this one, is I called it the Wild West days of the internet.
Oh yeah.
So before everything was a corporation, and when you would just go kind of searching for stuff, and there was a lot of just fan pages, and everybody was just kind of putting together stuff, and information seemed a little bit, I mean, there was some tall tales, of course, out there for sure. That was definitely spread throughout a lot of 90s stuff and into early 2000s. But it was all before it sounds weird. It felt like the internet was much bigger in the 90s and early 2000s than it is nowadays, because I think the corporations have sort of capped it into a bottle system. So it's like you don't really leave. You're kind of for a lot of people, they're just in the Facebook section of the internet. They're not really allowed to go out there. But the thing is because of all that, it says corporateness, ads especially. That's why searching on stuff like Google and stuff like that's almost just silly anymore, because 4 out of 5 pages are ads. They're not even real. You know what I mean? So it's but in the 90s, you just typed stuff in. It was just, everything was real. You know what I mean? And a lot of times there was a lot of fan page stuff. And there was a lot of people just sharing information that everybody sort of gathered and then kind of stacked upon each other. And I just thought it was a cool time, because if you wanted to go learn more about wrestling and so on like that, there was a lot of cool pages out there for that. If you wanted to learn more about video game history and just discovering new things, boom, there was all these places out there, like that. And, same with movies and so on. And it just felt like you just kind of could keep falling from one website to the next, the next, the next. And each one was unique. Everybody kind of had their own way of setting up things and so on like that. There was no safeguards in there. And I say that in a good way. You know what I mean? There was no, in a sense, people policing how it was. Just the internet was just the internet. You know what I mean? And
Rotten.com existed. I mean, yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, God, this is still the time, because I feel like I'm old enough that I could say, I remember buying stuff off Amazon when they only sold 4 different things. It was books, movies, CDs, and video games was a very brand new thing that they were toying with. And that was it. There was nothing else on Amazon at that time. You know what I mean? It's one of those ones where Amazon was, in a sense, a small website at one point in time. It did not feel like it was what it was. And as I said, I just miss those days when it just felt like there was a lot more freedom out there. You know what I mean? That was ROMs were being kind of passed along and so on like that. And they put those threatening messages from Bill Gates and Bill Clinton on there, but nobody worried.
Yeah. It was the Wild West is the best way to describe it because it was very unique. It was very personal. The best way to describe it to somebody like who's a little younger than us, who never really experienced it, is so if you're on Facebook, even if you ever even go on Facebook or whatever, and there's pages, and there's like some very specific niched pages where you're like, oh, this page talks about, analog radios, and this page talks about this thing. It was like that, but the whole internet was like that. And then every page was attached to a larger entity. They had a completely different format and completely different look. And it could be incredibly niche, and it felt like you found like a home. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, like anybody that's on this page, I fuck with that person. Like they're cool. Like, so you found like communities even more so, where now with like pages, people can be part of so many different things. Like you're not really finding that niche like you were back then. Yeah. And there was just a romanticism to it too. It was so unique and new. And like, so dumbass things like the dancing baby gif and the spinning skull and like under construction, looking back on that, it was so beautiful.
Yeah, there's just and plus it was still a time period where you could literally go and talk smack online and there was no repercussions.
Oh yeah.
Like the worst thing they would do is boot you off the server that you were like on. But that was it. You know what I mean? There was none of this. There was none of this like some other adult telling you how you can live your own life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which when you think of it like that kind of standard, like who the hell is anyone to tell somebody else what they can and can't do? You know?
That's 100% true. It's just, it's not for everybody, but it is. So the internet, and I'll kind of get on this too. Actually, I'll make that my next thing too. But the internet isn't for actually everybody. It's really not. Like, not everybody should be on it because some people can't handle it. And I don't know. It's just.
Well, and I will say I think that was the other thing that I liked about those earlier days. And I know this always seems like one of those ones, but everybody was generally on the internet was kind of there because they were into sort of like technology and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I hate to sort of say it, but it's like video games back in the day. Like everybody who played video games in the 90s generally and played them like when we're really into it, were really into it. There was no casual people in a sense. I'm not saying that, some people didn't just slightly play video games, but like if you met somebody in school that played a bunch of video games, like, you know what I mean? You had a connection right then and there. They didn't just, hey, this guy kind of just plays like two different games and that's about it or something like that. It's like, no, you're either all in or not at all. And I feel like that's how the internet was too. Like the internet was definitely, it was a place where I think you couldn't just go on there as just somebody with no technological experience. You had to sort of know what was up. Yeah,
no, I agree. And especially if you were making a site. Yeah. I'll shout out one real quick. I think I mentioned this to you before, but when the first websites I frequented is still up. I think it was like an Angel Fire website. It's called Nick's WCW page. And I used to go to it all the time, and I would look at really cool WCW stuff. And then one day it just stopped updating. And I didn't know what was going on. And I just kept visiting. And every like couple of weeks I'd visit. And finally, I think it was his mother got on there. I mean, it's still up now. You go to, Nick's WCW page, and he passed away like a 4-wheeler accident.
Oh, geez.
And, it's still up there as kind of like a memorial to him. So it's really, really cool. But you get an idea of what it was like. Oh, or the old Space Jam website, I think, is still up too.
Yeah. I think that they might have jacked with that when that new movie came out.
Yeah. I think they might have messed with it, but there's still some. And if you go to NeoCities, there's a website, which I want to make a website for a NeoCities website, which it's just like the old GeoCities page, and you make websites like that, and you could go look at some of the websites people have made. It looks like old internet.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's called neocities.com. And if you go there, there's tons of websites that are made old school way, old school look, dancing baby gifts, spinning skulls, crazy background, music loads up the second you get on the page. So there's a lot of really cool ones. So, but yeah, that's a good one. We've done 3 each now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you my next one, and it kind of ties in with what you just said. But I miss the role of internet in our lives. because the internet is like, to me, it's like the car, where there's a lot of great things it did for society. Okay. The freedom the car gave us, the, way it changed our lives, the way, like the opportunities that were available to us, the way we could live in like a couple towns over and still see family on a regular basis, where back, before the car, you could run away with somebody. Let's say you were married and like the husband stepped down on the wife. They go to the fucking next town over and live a whole ass life and them not know. And so like the car came along and it just radically changed everything. But the flip side of that is cars are expensive. They're nasty. They cause a lot of pollution. And then
They kill a lot of people.
they kill a lot of people. And then also just the infrastructure, like our whole economy became centered around car culture to an extent, because then our infrastructure was based on that too. So some cities became very less walkable. So we overdid it. Like, I like cars. I think cars are cool.
Yeah.
But we also, the role of it in our lives went a little too far. And then now to the point where we spend so much time in the car. So the internet's kind of become the same way. Like when it first came out, and it's still like this, the things it allows us to do, the things we're doing right now, like without the internet, we couldn't do.
Yeah.
So it's really, really great. And it for entrepreneurship, it's great for, talking to people, communicating people, keeping up with other people's lives. If you want to keep up with their lives and they want you to keep up with their lives, it's great for that. But then we've also went too far. I think it's hurts. Human interaction is different. It's not as special. I think that we can't be, boredom was good. Boredom was good for us. It caused creativity. It caused us to think. Sometimes you need everything to be quiet and your whole world to shut the fuck up. And so you could think and get your mind sorted out. And I think internet has made it very difficult I get addicted to the phone sometimes. I get addicted to certain things. So
there's something to be said about just sitting there and aimlessly not doing anything. And you start, then your brain starts running. And you almost don't get that, especially with the fact that you have like a phone in your pocket. And even if you're doing productive stuff, you could be reading a book, you can be doing all sorts of, good stuff on your phone. But the whole point is you're not doing you necessarily. You know what I mean? You start fading out to someone else's world, someone else's ideas, and so on like that. Now, granted, you could still be writing stuff. You can do all sorts of things. I mean, I use my phone to write all kinds of ideas and, notes and books and so on. But there is something to be said about like back in the day when you just didn't have anything. You just sat there. Like, you had to like just wait somewhere. Like say you had to wait after school and you had to wait for someone to come by and pick you up. Well, a lot of times you just sat there for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes, you can't think about right now what you're thinking then, but, who knows, that still gives you time to think,
Yeah, it was just a very, very different thing. Yeah, having to sit there and think for 20 minutes or just kind of veg out and just, I know it sounds so stupid, but just look at the trees, look at the sky. Yeah, I think you found like some center when you were doing that. And you really were able to work some things out in your mind. And now you need that constant stimulation. And me, even when my mind wanders now, I start thinking about something and I get an idea. Then I'm like, oh, let me look that up and see if there's. So I actually go for the phone because that wealth of information is there. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing. Because, I used to be able to connect dots on things and think about it. And then when I had the chance, the little bit of time on the internet, I'd go look it up and to confirm my beliefs on something, whether I was right or wrong. But now I can know instantly. It's just like, it's crazy.
Well, I've thought about that before for many years too, is that, it used to be one of those ones that say like you're on a road trip and you're driving and then you see sort of a sign off in the distance and you ask your buddy and you go, hey, what do you think that's all about? And then because you're just going, hey, what do you think that's all about? You would sit there and you would almost kind of come up with your own ideas of what that thing might be, whether that's right, wrong, or anything in between. Where nowadays there's always some guy like, oh, give me a second, I'll look it up. And in a sense, what it just did is it just put up a brick wall of creativity and thinking and just stopped it flat in its tracks and just, in a sense, had the machine answer for you without doing any thinking. You know, even if you're wrong, but like sometimes there's something good to be said about just creative thinking. That makes a big difference. So it pretty much just told your brain to sit the fuck back down. That's okay. Machine Daddy's here and he'll take over.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's sort of it, is we've lost a lot of times, a lot of good thinking. Thinking, so, you know, I mean, nobody, very few people just sit and think anymore. You know, I mean, I even, as I said, I think about doing that, but then I don't do it as often as I wish I could.
Yeah, it's there. I mean, there's so many things you can say about the internet. Like I said, human interaction, but also just people, like it makes the things that are bad with society worse. Like conspiracy theorists. Like, I'm conspiratorial in a lot of ways. In some ways, I'm not. But I've noticed as time goes on that we have way more to be skeptical about.
Yep.
But also people will go on there and look for confirmation bias or looking for things to confirm that their belief, where we didn't land on the moon, we didn't whatever. And then the thing that drives me up the fucking wall is when people are like, did you do the research? I'm like, did you do research, or did you just read a bunch of dumb shit on the internet? Like, if anything makes my skin crawl, it's like when people are debating with me, like, I've done research. No, the fuck you haven't.
Yeah,
You read some weird shit
you're not
on
a scientist.
Yeah, no, you haven't. You read weird shit on a weird website that somebody lied about, and that is not research. Like, it's just, that infuriates the shit out of me. And the internet has made that way worse. Like, if you're a dumb person, the internet helps your stupidity. It encourages your stupidity. In fact, it helps you find other people that are also stupid.
Yeah,
and
it takes you down the rabbit hill, or the rabbit, hole of all that.
Yeah.
And just really can take you in the wrong direction. You know what? It really ties back into the astrology type thing. I think it's like conspiracies and astrology kind of are in that exact same thing, where some people just, it's fun if you're having a good time with it and you're doing it kind of for fun and you're just doing a little what if scenario. The second, though, that you start taking them a little too serious, that's when there's a problem.
Yeah, that's crazy. I will say one thing about the horoscope thing, going back to it, that I'll say something nice. You hear something weird? I've had 3 major relationships in my life, including my wife. All 3 of them had the same birthday.
Oh, that's interesting.
That is weird. That is the only thing that's maybe even consider it, but that is fucking
there
weird.
is like that math statistic thing that says that if there's I can't remember what it is, there's a certain amount of people in the room that there's like one out of like 24 or something like that will actually have the same birth date or something like that, like almost every single time. So like a classroom size is what I always kind of think about.
Yeah.
Though now that I think about it, I don't remember in the classroom how many people had the same birthday, like you know, but still interesting things like that. So it's not, I guess, as random as one might think, but still random enough.
This is making my hair look red. You see that? My hair looks red.
Well, it's probably because
Yeah, I don't know. It's cool.
They took some color out to bring it down for the internet.
Yeah, look at that. It's weird. All right. So we both done 3, I think. So what's your next one?
So my other one kind of ties into one sort of you previously did, but then expands on it in a different direction. And I title this one The Wait. And what I say about The Wait is this goes back to like 90s movies, and when movies kind of had magic and mystique and had power and felt larger than life, is The Wait was another big thing that brought that on. And that was the time period that, a movie came out in the cinemas, and then it took about a good year, sometimes more, for a movie to come out on VHS and Laserdisc and home video. And then it would take about another 6 months to another year if you wanted to wait for that to come out on TV, and in between that, it would come out on HBO or, Cinemax or any of those ones. But that wait made a movie seem bigger also because it had multiple, in a sense, release dates. So you could almost go with like a roller coaster like flow where it's like, boom, it comes out in the cinema, you got to go see it right now, there's only a handful of weeks and so on like that, and then it dips down. And then in that waiting period, another thing that was kind of cool is that they used to put out the novelizations / the comic book adaptations, which a lot of people would, they'd look at those nowadays sometimes and go, well, why the hell would you want the book of I could just watch the movie. I'm like, you don't get it. At that time period though, that was almost like having your home copy of it. If you wanted to see that movie again, well, you can't go see it in the cinemas. It's not there for a while, but you can read it, whether it be a comic book form or novel form. And sometimes even those versions, they'll even have extended scenes and different stuff from the scripts that wasn't in the movie. So you are getting a little bit of alternative version. But that wait made the build up to like when the VHS came out so special. You know what I mean? Because man, you've been sitting there like, that movie was so good, I cannot wait to see it again, and so on like that. And then maybe if you didn't capture it on VHS yourself, maybe you just rent it or something like that. That next one, the next big pop would be when it comes out on TV.
Yeah. It kept things in the cultural zeitgeist for longer. So I'm struggling with thinking of an example of recently stuff, but I can remember there being movies when in the past 10 years where it comes out, it's a huge deal, it makes a ton of money, and then it's immediately available on streaming or HBO. It seems like HBO is the one that does this the worst. Like it'll be on there like after 2 weeks.
HBO's kind of screwed that over more than any probably other streaming one.
Yeah, and not that they're the only ones. Other ones do it too, but I feel like they've done it the most. And so immediately after it's, in theaters, or sometimes even while it is in theaters, it's on a streaming thing. Then you can go watch it over and over again. And then once it kind of hits that window is over and you don't even think about it anymore. There's a lot of big movies of the past 10, 15 years where like after they had that little window, it's like you'd forget they even existed. Yeah. And back then when you had that year to wait, it was almost like the movie was released again. Because you had another ad campaign, and sometimes you'd even have like the stars of the movie go on another tour, like another promotional tour, like, oh, it's coming out on VHS and whatever, or they're gonna start showing it on TNT or something like that, like, or if it was just hitting HBO or Cinemax, you'd start hearing them talk about it again, see commercials for it again, and it did keep things around longer. I mean, Independence Day is one I remember, like, it was big. I watched it. I had to wait a while for the VHS. And after the VHS, it started showing up on, TV. And it like, oh, this is still a big thing. So I had like a 5 or 6 year run of it being a big deal.
Yeah.
Before it became like a classic, So, yeah, you're totally right on that.
Nowadays, even the biggest movie possible, still, it comes out and it's gone. There's really nothing I can almost say in about at least the last 15 years. I mean, I'll even say even Avengers Endgame, that still is like a drop in the pan compared to how big like other movies used to be back in the day. It might have the money coming in, but like the spectacle was just not there. It was huge for that 2 or 3 weeks, and then that was kind of it. That was the end of it.
Even like Dune 2, which came out this year, or it was Dune Chapter 2, whatever it's called. Which, by the way, I loved that movie. It's one of those movies in the past 10 years I watched. I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch that again. I really, really liked it. But even it kind of like, because it was on streaming and stuff right away, like it's theatrical run and then it's like rental, streaming, VOD, whatever, that run was all like in one block. And then now it's like, past. It's weird. There's not a lot of movies that do that.
Yeah, pretty much about the mid 2000s was kind of about the last time, like really like the last big ones I can think of is like stuff like Lord of the Rings, that one, and not even the Hobbit one, but Lord of the Rings, because the Hobbit one fell into like the fast get them out and quickly kind of thing. But yeah, like Lord of the Rings was like one of the last big, like where they really they drug that out, because they did it where like there's in the theaters and you had to wait, and then the video would come out, and then you'd have to wait for the next one, and then they would also do that thing, be like, oh yeah, and then by the way, like another year later we got the extended edition, so that was one of the last times I remember them really like making that kind of go the distance. And then there were some DVD, like the big thing on the DVD era, I guess you would say, was that a lot of times they had that point where they had the movie in theaters, and to make the DVD release seem special, they either have an unrated, extended, director's cut. Like that was kind of the one thing that did make it have like a double release thing, and that sort of faded away too. You don't see that anymore.
Yeah, they'd schedule those big movies right there before Christmas. The big summer movies. Yeah, it's just crazy. The last movie for me, I felt like fit the tradition, the model that we grew up with, where I saw the theater for the first time, the trailer for the first time in theaters, and then went to the movie theater and saw it, and then couldn't wait for it to come out on physical media, and then was The Dark Knight. That was the last one. I felt like that was the end of an era movie for me, where it wasn't that way for everybody, but it was for a lot of people, like where that was the last one of that kind of run that I remember. And ever since then, it's been different.
Well, because that's in like the last era of the midnight movies too, the midnight premieres. I mean, I think The Dark Knight Rises is the one that killed midnight movies. But, literally. Yeah. Nothing that to do with the Batman part, but just some crazy fuck. But that's one of those ones that that kind of was one of those last real big spectacles where like people waited outside. I've got something I even just missed too. It's like there's not even lines outside movie theaters anymore. You know what I mean? Like, even the biggest, even like Deadpool and Wolverine, which technically would have been the biggest movie I think this year so far. And it's like there's 10 people waiting inside the concession stand area to get their tickets.
Yeah, well, you buy the tickets online before you get there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then like the movie times are all spread out. Then you got this group of people that's pirating it. And so it's just like, it's not a cultural event. Like it was you want to see fucking Independence Day when it came out. You want to see Jurassic Park when it came out. You better have your ass at the theaters.
Place to go.
Yeah, there's one place to go. You fucking better be there or you're going to be a loser. Okay.
Be there, be square.
Mm-hmm. This ties into movies. I used the word tie in on purpose. I think we'll both agree on this one. We can make it quick because I think we have like two each. Fast food in the 90s.
Yep.
It was the tie-ins. It was the aesthetic. It was the food itself. The culture around it was just so much better. The food was better. Yellow Wendy's fucked harder than current Wendy's. Everything didn't look like a doctor's office. Like McDonald's now looks like a dentist office.
Yeah, Taco Bell used to have all the fun-filled like Via VHS color scheme.
Yeah, it did. It did, and like the one that's, they still kind of have that. And this is definitely one that's just like people argue it's a taste thing because maybe some of the younger millennials and Gen Z, they prefer that aesthetic, the minimalist aesthetic. But boy, that tacky ass over the top. Just ridiculousness. McDonald's was to me at its peak when it had that dark blue and mixed in with the red and yellow. That M had the dark blue shade behind it. That was peak fucking McDonald's right there. And the tie-ins were great. The Obamas kind of ended that, which I understand. I don't hate on them for that. They were trying to keep us healthier.
Yeah.
God damn it, I want my tie-in. I want my tie-ins.
You know what? And here's the thing: as a kid, I wasn't eating the food. I would literally be that person, be like, "Hey, how much does it cost so I can buy this stuff without having to buy the food?" Because I didn't really want the food. I just want the toys. I want the cups. I want the watches. I all that stuff is what I loved.
And McDonald's right now is trying to bring it back. They have collector's cups out right now, which even the font around the collector's cups looks very 80s, late 70s, early 80s kind of. Remember when we did this shit? But like, peak fast food was when there was ball pits in the McDonald's. Yep. They were doing Batman Forever glassware. Just we could do. I feel like I could do a podcast alone on just 90s fast food, 80s and 90s fast food tie-ins. The cups. I got this Batman Forever McDonald's cup behind me over here. Is it Batman Forever? Batman Returns.
Yeah, I got the Batman and Robin Taco Bell cups.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's right. They went back to Taco. So Batman started at Taco Bell. The first one was Taco Bell. Then it goes to McDonald's, and that was a huge fiasco with Batman Returns. And they got all the letters. And
was Forever Burger King? I could be wrong.
Forever was McDonald's. Because when they fired Tim Burton like McDonald's wanted, and then that's when they got the glasses.
Yeah.
At McDonald's.
That's right.
And then it switched to back to Taco Bell.
Yeah, and those glasses are pure amazing.
Oh
yeah, you got that cup version. Yeah,
it's
that
like
one's really.
It's a Frisbee lid.
Well, and see the thing too, I hate to start saying, I know this is not like the fancy recycle, but I'm not looking to recycle any of this stuff. I miss the real hard plastic that those used to come in too. Because now a lot of times some of the ones you get every once in a while, it's like cool. There's a Jurassic World one or something like that, but they give you like the most cheapest like cup. That's like you're like I want something that's gonna last longer than I do.
Yeah, no, even those cups I had to send to you for the wrestling stuff at Bojangles, it's not this.
Yeah.
It's not this stuff. This was hard. The only place I can think of that has cups like this anymore, and it's been a while since I've been to one, so it might not even there, but like theme parks still had this for like a long time.
Well, yeah, because I feel like because they're charging you like $20 a cup, they feel like they got to give you some plastic.
Right. I mean, but yeah, the fast food, it's just not the same. And the prices have went up in the quality. There's some I won't even eat at anymore, which is probably a good thing. That's probably in the next decade of my life thing I want to give up the most. But there's some like Arby's, complete ass now. I used to love Arby's.
I used to I just love just the straight roast beef sandwiches. Like no bells or whistles, but
yeah, now it's just complete trash. Like you go in there and it's just you feel bad about yourself now.
Yeah,
you know
like doing
I mean?
something wrong.
Yeah, honestly, you feel like I really subjected myself to that. Like I was talked to the way I was talked to. I was treated the way I was. I paid way too much for just garbage, like stuff I could have made at home way better.
Yeah.
And it's just back in the 90s, it felt like, okay, we're on the go. We had fucking soccer practice. We had football practice. Somebody had a dance recital. We had to stay after school for a long, let's just swing by McDonald's. And everybody's going to get, not healthy, but we're going to get food and we're going to feel okay about it.
Yeah.
I miss that. It's just not the same anymore. And don't get me started on Pizza Hut, because Pizza Hut really screwed the pooch.
Oh, well, Pizza Hut was a completely different restaurant. That's the thing. That like Pizza Hut back in the day was just it was actually a classy, nice restaurant in the same realm as Round Table and all that kind of stuff. But in a sense, they went from being a normal restaurant to a fast food restaurant, which I can't think of too many other restaurants that have ever done that. Where like you actually switched levels down, where you're like, we had this nice restaurant and we decided, why be nice? Let's go quick and easy and get rid of those chairs. We don't want these hooligans sitting in here anymore, playing their ping pong and bringing in that Chuck E. Cheese junk. No.
Yeah.
Pizza Hut. We're going to put a counter here and get you the hell out of here.
Yeah, we don't want to do a butt club anymore. They had it perfect because they had good food. Mm-hmm. They were able, and they had the tie-ins. They had the awesome tie-ins. Land Before Time, great tie-in. They had a great Ninja Turtles tie-ins.
They used to have PlayStation tie-ins where they gave you like demo discs and so on like that.
Man, yes, I forgot about that. I remember ordering pizza and getting movies.
Yeah, they had a VH. One of my X-Men movies back here is I didn't know, I bought it from like a thrift store, but I learned it was a Pizza Hut version because I had different ones, and it was the pizza. I think it's right there. Yeah. Right back there. It's the Pizza Hut version of like the first 2 episodes of X-Men the animated series. Yeah.
They did cool stuff. And granted, a Burger King had McDonald's. TMNT VHS. Mm-hmm. McDonald's at one point in time, you could buy VHS with your food. You could buy like an Indiana Jones or whatever VHS. But Pizza Hut did it the best. That's the one that if I could change any of them back, it would be that one, because the aesthetic, and they still have classics ones. There's one down the road about an hour that's beside a drive-in, and I want to go to I need to go to it. So.
I need to almost look up and see if any of those exist in California, if they're bringing back any of those Pizza Hut classics, because all the ones I know of they closed in like the early 2000s, and I never saw them again.
I have a list, actually. I can tell you in a minute if they have one, and if they have one in your area, because
I'll take anywhere in the state, because at some point I'll go to that direction.
Well,
unless it's like San Diego, I don't want to go there. That's kind of a distance.
Yeah, that is probably. Richologist Guide, the Pizza Hut Classic, will look real fast before we move on to the topic, because I'm curious if they have any in California, Arkansas, Georgia. Looks like it went past California altogether.
Yeah,
Arkansas,
that sounds
Florida,
probably
Georgia.
about right. California is like the state that gets skipped on a lot of things. I think because they like the tax a little bit more, and that scares people away.
Yeah, there's 3 of them. I think there's maybe 4 of them in North Carolina, and they're all in like rural backwoods areas.
Yeah, gotcha.
yeah,
I'd even
so-
take one if there's one in Nevada, but there's probably not one in Nevada, sadly.
Yeah.
It would go really good right next to that video store.
Oh my God, I'm surprised they don't have one next to that video store. No, none in Nevada, North Carolina. There's like 6 of them in North Carolina. Ohio has a bunch. But
Okay, so it definitely seems like an Eastern thing. It seems like there's not a whole lot in the West, but maybe they'll eventually come someday.
yeah, some in Texas. If you ever end up in Texas, Virginia.
Yeah.
The Virginia one still has the book it stuff up. So, so what's your next one?
Okay, so my I guess I'm on the total final one on my list now. And my last thing is the big thing that I miss, probably almost more than many of these other ones, is the in-person multiplayer of video games. This one to me is such a big, in a sense, this is like my whole upbringing was that, mostly I had so many people that like I had the house where people just all came on over and we sat down, and whether we were playing Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, PlayStation, Dreamcast, yada, 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 there was so much camaraderie in all these systems of even just, small things of like, oh, we're going to play a game co-op. We're going to play some Streets of Rage and go through the game and see how far we make it. To things of, we're going to play Mario Party, 4-player Mayhem, GoldenEye, 4-player split screen. And the joy of playing a video game with all your buds right then and there, is, it's one of those ones like the online thing can never recreate it. Ever. To me, the online thing, it's like a cool bonus feature. It's like, oh, cool. Like, if you guys can't get together this week, well, there's that online feature to, like, to hold you over. Like, that's what it really feels like. It does not feel, and I know there's so many other people have, like, moved on and, like, they just live in the online world version and so on. They just accept it. It's like, oh, this is just what it is and so on. And don't get me wrong, I've tried it here and there. But it's just that thing where it's not the same. It'll never be that same experience. No. There's just no way. The better thing you could probably do is just, put some money into your house and just put in 2 systems, 2 versions of the game, 2 TVs, and then just kind of make it old school yet new school at the same time and play sitting right next to each other. That would be the closest thing to get that experience back, is you just, in a sense, create your own LAN party at your house, but with modern variations. But and that's even something too. Is even stuff like that. It's just it's harder. Yeah, I guess that's also a getting older thing too. It feels like it's hard just to get the whole gang together to come on by and play some video games for a good amount of time. Because that's a lot of times sometimes if you're lucky, if you get somebody to come over to your house, and the next thing you know, they're like, I got a half an hour. And you're like, oh Jesus. We'll get past like the intro menu by that point, and then you'll have to go. Yeah, so it's not the same as being able to be like, oh, I'm coming over after school. We're gonna hang out Friday to Sunday. We're gonna game it up, watch a bunch of movies, hang out. Maybe bring over more people, and just have that experience. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've never laughed more. I've never had more of a bigger smile on my face. The challenge, playing Street Fighter and Dead or Alive when you got your buddy sitting right next to you. Oh, man, it's just one of those ones. Like, it's just, to me, I feel like it's the best of times.
It is, and it can't be recreated with the internet. And the reason why is because when you have your friends there, it might get heated. It might get controversial. There might be some arguments and stuff, but more than that, it's going to be fun, and there's going to be some decorum. But you get online and some like 11-year-old from Oklahoma calls you the N-word, and you don't know this kid. You know what I mean? And it says things you're going to do to your mom. And they're not going to say that if they're in your house and your mom's there. You know what I mean? Like, well, they might, but
Well, yeah, but back in those days too, I remember like you would get like the loud friends, and it's like not they weren't saying anything disrespectful like that, but you just get those friends where they get a little too excited, and then like the parents are like next time like, don't invite that kid over next time. It was 2 a.m. and he's screaming at the top of his lungs.
Yeah.
So you do get a little bit of that.
Yeah. but you know that you could police that. I mean, it's just, you can talk about Wild West. The last Wild West place for the internet is video game online. The way people talk to each other.
Well, that was the thing. Is God that comes back to my like late '90s, early 2000s. Like that was when like you could just say shit. You could talk smack. Well, because it was the weird thing. It was actually kind of expected to talk smack. Like that was almost like, dude, if you could talk some good smack online, like it was almost people were like, fuck yeah. And then all of a sudden, I hate to sort of say it, we got to the culture that the wussies won. That's what happened. I mean, that is almost the definition of woke, is that the wussies got power. Where before it used to be like, God, there's this fucking asshole here. He's bitch. You know, bitch. This goes back to, actually, I'll say this. It comes back to the old days of like, you're on the school playground, and ever since I was a little kid, I mean, we almost treated it like it was literally like, you know, Goodfellas out there. Even before we even saw Goodfellas, we just kind of did, is that you never told on the yard duty. God forbid you handled your shit right, or you and your buddies handled it, but you did not. It was almost like that weird thing. We had this notion like, you don't talk to cops, you don't talk to the yard duty, you know. And I feel like the thing is there's a lot of people nowadays who they call on that yard duty because they know that the yard duty will work in their favor for them, you know. And I think that's what sort of changed, is that kind of policing came out. And you know, if you just say one-off comments, you could lose your entire account online, you know?
Yeah, that was the worst. I think it's the worst thing for people like me. If there's one area where I'm arrogant, I am like, actually, like, I'm very arrogant about this. I feel like I'm the top 1% in the world if, like, I really want to verbally assault someone, like, really, really do it. I'm good. I'm really good at it. And
you get that attitude era smackdown laying.
Oh my God. I've said some shit. Oh man. And it's amazing I haven't been shot. It's amazing. Like, cause I have a bad temper, but I've also just like, when I could be pretty quick witted. And like, if I am in a verbal like debate with somebody, like it gets a little heated, I could just destroy them. And even if I don't believe what I'm saying, like, but yeah, so it's kind of good that some of that stuff's went away, but you're right. It was fun when we could say mean shit to each other and understand that it was just, you know, grow some thick skin. And, you know, sometimes you needed to hear some of the shit that was said to you, you know?
Yeah.
You needed to hear some of it. Like, well, maybe I am kind of an asshole in this way, or maybe like I do need to not put my hair, like wear my hair like this. Maybe I do look like a dumbass. So like maybe, you know, so
no one pointed out yet. That was the only thing.
Yeah. So
you could have said it a little bit nicer, but and I get the point. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm going to cry a little bit, but I'm glad they say, you know, but yeah, that kind of leads me to my last thing, because it's kind of the same thing, but my biggest thing that I miss, and there was problems with this in the 90s too, and the 80s and the early 2000s, and it really changed after 2000. Like September 11th changed made a lot of things worse in our culture. Like it there was that 6-month period where everybody's patriotic and getting along, and then after that it ramped up. Everything got, you know, the polarization got further apart, and that's the role, like polarization and the healthy way we dealt with racial stuff. Like there was bad racial stuff in the 90s. Okay, like Rodney King, there was a lot of it, but the conversations we had about it and the way we like took in media was healthier in my opinion. And it called, like, I think there was more empathy. I think there was more friendships cultivated back then between different people of different ideologies, different races, now it's just like so polarized. And you go back and listen to like a debate from, you know, 1996, like Bob Dole and Bill Clinton. They're very different people. Yeah. They have very different ideologies, but it makes it, when you look at what we have this year and what we had the last election and even the election before that, the difference in ideologies it's completely honestly, even the 2016 one, like Trump versus Hillary Clinton, is not near what we have now. And then you go back to the 90s and you listen to a debate like between like Clinton and Dole, or even Al Gore and George H.W. Bush. It's like not, it's more nuanced in terms of what the differences are. You know what I mean? And like everything's in the extreme version of it, because these political parties have to consolidate their ideas into like one thing to keep everybody on the same page. And so they have to break everything down to like the most minute, point. And just to keep everybody in line, when really everything has nuance, everything has gray area, which also means there's compromise, but we can't even get to that.
Yeah.
And it's the hatred, the vitriol, the craziness, just embracing so much, just absolute batshittery.
Yeah.
And it's both sides. This is not, it's too much. It's way too much.
Yeah, well, the radicalism kind of went a little too far out of control.
Oh yeah,
I think that's sort of it, and it literally everything became definitely more black and white. There is no gray.
Yeah.
And, well, and I feel like here's the thing: everybody who's in the gray zone, everybody who's in a sense in that like, independent, maybe swing vote, all that kind of section there. I feel those people almost feel like they're all the lost group. Like you just don't.
Oh
really
yeah.
know what you just feel like, huh? This is kind of weird, and it's just whatever happens. But like, it's such a bizarre, like, yeah, it's just like I don't know. I feel like your choices have never been so much more like one-sided of like it's this or that, and that's about it. I mean, I know it's been like that forever. That you either had one or the other. You never got something else, but it definitely has a much more harder edge, and it goes with a lot more things, even beyond politics and so on like that. People seem to be. I don't know. I just don't remember in the 90s a whole lot of people like turning on each other if, you voted for Bob Dole. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it wasn't as like people worry about the holidays now and spending the holidays with family members who, feel one way or another. I don't remember that. Well, now, granted, everybody in my family that I hate Thanksgiving with, I mean, they all felt the same way pretty much. But we did have close friends that we spent time with that had different political views than my parents, and they were like best friends with us. So it's just, I don't know. It's just really crazy to me how radical things have become and how it's just going so far apart. And both sides, it's like, you used to, the radical people were like the niche part. And so you kind of had to address them just to keep them on your side, but you just kind of kept them at a distance, kept them at arm's length. Like, yeah, okay, I'll go talk to the super crazy fundamentalists over here. But, I'm just going to say enough to get them to vote for me, but I don't really going to engage with them too much. But now like that, I feel like they're the ones who are leading the charge on both ends. So,
yeah, well, you know what it is? This comes back down to like once the internet kind of shifted gears and so on like that, it gave the wussies a lot of power, but it also gave the crazy people a lot more power.
Oh, yeah.
Because the thing is realistically, both those groups are actually the total minute minority. They are not actually that many people. The average person does not fit at all into there. But those people's voices are now so amplified that it makes them feel like they're much more the majority.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. I think the internet has a lot to blame with it, but especially the way people can just interact with each other all the time. You can go start talking shit to liberals. You start talking shit to conservatives anytime you want right now. But really, where it started, I think where it really started going off the rails was cable news, and and that's both ends. I remember my parents just watching Fox News all the time, and I'm like, of course they said some things that were right, but then they would take like I'll use an example, an isolated incident or just like a couple incidents and apply it to a whole ideology. So like a couple kids use the restroom in a litter box in places, and now all Gen Z is doing that. No. Yeah. And both sides do this kind of shit. Like, well, look what this racist did over here. I'm like, yeah, well, that's one racist asshole in one racist place. Like, let's not. Yeah. It's just, oh man, the cable news started it. That's where, especially after 9/11, when we got to the next election, Bush Kerry, and things were like people were really upset about the war and what we were doing with certain things, and cable news really took off. That's where it started, was then. And then the internet, just once we got Wi-Fi, we could talk shit anywhere at any time. That took it to the next level. And it's just, oh my God.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely cable news. I even say local news is pretty bad too, because gosh, I haven't watched TV in so long. And I was over at my buddy's house, and his dad just had the TV on the background. It was just the local Sacramento news, and it was just like, dude, after like 20 minutes, I'm like, all it was bad, death, murder.
Yes.
Like, that's, I mean, granted, I know Stockton pulls a lot of stuff. I'm like, dude, Stockton's not that bad. Let's be honest. Like, you're making it seem like it's so much. That's why everybody's so fearful of Stockton, is because they watch the stupid news.
It's true. It's true. The Raleigh news, I don't watch it very often. And at work, there was a sporting event on. It was when the Olympics were on. And there was that break when they don't have the Olympics and they have the local news for a little bit. And like everything they talked about was just downer.
Down. And now it just really reminded me of like, and this is why I don't watch the news or watch normal TV for that matter. And like why I gave it up, as much as I could be nostalgic for old TV, there was that time period that there was a breaking moment for me in about the mid 2000s where I realized I had to give up just watching normal TV. And it was when I learned that the TV was sort of holding me hostage and stuff. And it all stems to, like, there was a show called Full Metal Alchemist, and I was like just obsessed with it at this moment. And it came on Saturday nights, and my Saturday was dictated by that show. I wouldn't go to someone's house if they didn't happen to have Cartoon Network. It was like, forget it. You don't have Cartoon Network? I'm sorry, I'm not missing that. So you either got to come on over or you're not hanging out. I'll invite somebody else over who does want to watch it. And then if you missed it, oh man, you would kick yourself so hard because there's always something important and so on like that. And that just was like where I was like, you know what? This is it. This is running my life. I need to stop this. This is a terrible way to like indulge in stuff. And ever since then, I've sort of faded away from a lot, like, the standard TV.
Mm-hmm. Mondays were like that for me with wrestling back in the day. And and the only thing I have left like that, the only time I watch any TV anymore is football. Yeah. Like, and I'll be watching some in the next couple of weeks, like, because football will be back. But I mean, I don't know, man. It's the polarization is rough. The racial divide is just crazy. You know,
that's the weirdest one too. Because I always just think about it, like, as a kid, I never remember there being like. I just felt like when you watch stuff on TV, they were never trying to point out like, hey, that guy's gay. Hey, we put a couple black people in there. Did you see it? It's like it
was
feel
too
like that.
Forced.
Yeah,
it was okay. When I come home from school, I would watch Family Matters. I'd watch the Jamie Foxx show. I watched Martin. And I never thought I'm watching black shows. Fresh
Sanford
Prince.
and Son.
I watched every episode of Fresh
Jefferson's.
Prince.
Like, I mean, I would watch all that stuff, and it just intermixed. That's how I sort of felt. Like,
yeah.
I even thought about the other day because we had this conversation a while back on something that was like maybe not an Analog Legends, but one of our other like offshoot casual episodes, and I was like, I literally never saw like anything even remotely racist for like over a decade. Like, I just did not. It was just not a part, and I just don't remember it at all in the 90s. Nobody like was like that at school. There wasn't. I don't remember that like on TV. Maybe if you're watching a rated R movie, there might be something brought up in there, but not in like PG-13 stuff.
What there was around, and it was a problem.
Yeah,
and maybe they went too light on it in some ways, and they could have addressed a little bit more. But I will say this: what was more powerful on my end, I'll never know what it feels like on the other end, but I can say that when I'm watching Family Matters and they have the one episode where like, the son gets, I think it was Eddie was the son. He gets, basically harassed by a police officer. Mm-hmm. And like, he's in a bad part of town. Oh, he's in the good part of town. He shouldn't be over there. And he harasses him, and the cop, Carl Winslow, has to go down and talk shit to this other cop. Like, that one wrecked me when I was a kid. I felt so bad. I had empathy because this wasn't a black show. These were just people that I was watching, and they were a family just like the family I was part of. And then now when they make a show like that, it's like, this is a black show. This is a Latino show. This is for us. No, it's for everybody. This is how we, gain empathy and understanding with each other. Like, it was a lot better, I feel like, than the way they handle that stuff.
I also will say, I think with myself too, is like, there's that kid mentality where you don't pick sides. You just kind of see it as is. You know what I mean? Where like, it almost took somebody else to point that out to me, be like, hey, by the way, that's a black show. And you're like, oh.
Thanks, Grandpa.
Yeah, like something like that. Like, I was just watching it as people, and you came along and put some ideology into it. Like, yeah, and it just never crossed my mind back as a kid. That was just what it was. I said I just watched all the stuff that just came on TV, and it was all kind of one and the same. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've always felt like I watched Predator and I related to Carl Weathers. I'm like, I just love Carl Weathers here. Like, it didn't cross my mind that like there's anything different here. It's just one of those ones. I felt like nowadays it's just like they feel like they just gotta. It's the shoehorning. It's just, and I know that like because some people will say that the '90s is the start of that actually PC type stuff.
It did start there.
It is there. It just doesn't feel as hard in that one there. It just feels like if you have like a group of kids and they're multiracial, they just are. We don't have to point out what every single one is and really like have like neon signs pointing down at them. I think that's the part that's just in stuff nowadays. It's just, and I just feel like all it is a bunch of like producers behind like patting each other on the back, like, yeah, we did good.
Mm-hmm. It's we made this so people on Twitter won't yell at us.
Yeah, and we'll get a tax. We'll get that tax write-off thing or whatever they get for that inclusion weird stuff where you get money back from it. There's a bunch of other weird stuff that goes on.
It's in the 90s when they did it and it started, it came out of a place of empathy and compassion and trying to do the right thing. And I think later on it became like a political statement. Let's make this person mad. Like it's just not the same anymore. And that's the thing. If I could change one thing and go back, it would be like, can we just like have a little bit more harmony? Can we be a little bit less radical? Can like Republicans and Democrats be a little bit more centrist and just one leads a little more blue, one leads a little more red? Yeah. Instead of just what the fuck is that? And also what the fuck is that? And I don't like either one of those things. Like, holy shit. But, we'll see how we
just have like our Arnold Schwarzeneggers that are kind of like a mixed match of both.
Yeah, like
you know what I mean. That's like the best one. Is like that's like almost I feel like the best examples. Arnold was kind of like he's a Republican, but he also has a lot of Democratic views.
Yeah, Bill Clinton.
Yeah, fuse them together.
Yeah, Bill Clinton. When I was a kid, I was taught to hate him, and he is kind of a slimy scuzz bucket. Don't get me wrong. Don't.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he's old Bill.
Yeah, I'll Slick Willie. But he worked with both sides. He did a lot of stuff, and him and Newt Gingrich probably fucking hated each other and said the meanest shit about each other behind closed doors, and to themselves too. But but they worked together. They got shit done. And you don't even see any of that anymore. But anyway, to somebody else listening who's younger, this is the good old days to you. Don't let us tell you any different. it's just
a bunch of old guys sitting on their fucking rocking chairs outside.
Yeah,
yelling at clouds and the youth.
We're getting there, dude. I'm in the waning months of my 30s right now.
Yeah, well, I'll say this: if we were back in the day, like it was the 70s or the 80s, we would be getting towards like that age. We're like, oh, look, there's an old guy. I mean, shit. Homer Simpson. I remember like when I found out there's one of those episodes where they said his age. His age is 35. So like, yeah, if that tells you that, or King of the Hill, like I think they're 38 in that show.
Man, listen. We like our age bracket ages differently.
Yeah, totally.
We just do. And it's so funny because I've aged a lot in the past 2 years, especially like since in that area where my mom passed and then my youngest son was born until now, I've aged the most I've aged my entire life. And I still look younger than the guy in Beverly Hills Cop who was actually like 5 years younger than me at that time. I was like, oh my God, it's just like, it's crazy.
Yeah,
now,
It's so weird how that kind of is nowadays too. Or I don't even notice it just around me. Like if you run into people that you kind of knew from back in school, certain people have aged much differently.
Yeah, but overall our generation ages, pretty well, and even the younger millennials who were younger than us, like, older than us, they've aged pretty well too. Like they're in their 40s now.
Yeah.
And they look like they're in the late 20s, early 30s. It's crazy. So now I can't say anything for this red hair. This shit's giving. I don't know what the fuck that's about.
You get your like Matt Murdock hair going on there.
It's weird. I can't feel. It's really bothering me. Do you see it?
It's probably because we turned the camera's resolutions down to make the stream like as smooth as possible, and in that process, it probably had to take out some color. So now it's changed like your dynamic.
It's the weirdest shit. Real quick story about the 90s, and we'll head up. My mom in the 90s. My brother and sister have a little bit lighter hair than me. They were like sandy blonde for the most part. More on the sandy side. They were like more brunette than blonde, but they had some blonde in their hair. I had none. I've always had coal black hair. Now with some gray.
Now red.
Yeah, now red. But this is a good. This leads to what I'm talking about. Mom, I was like 98, 99. She got some sun in. Do you remember sun in?
Yes.
Holy fuck. Well, she put it on my brother and sister's hair, and it made their hair like we were always outside because it was the fucking 90s, and their hair turned blonde, and it looked beautiful, and they had like these streaks of blonde hair. I mean, it looked amazing. She put that shit in my hair and our hair, and it looked like this. So there's this picture I was looking at the other day. I'll have to share it. I might put it up on the end here. It was my mom and all of us and my brother and sister, and my brother and sister's hair like looked pretty good, but man, me and my mom had this pumpkin orange hair. And it happened when I was in a cast too. I had this problem with my foot, and I was in a cast for a really long time, and I was on crutches, and I had this Goldberg shirt on, and I have red hair for some reason, and it's just like, it was a shit show. I was like, God damn. Sun-in does not work on me. It looked like this. This is what it looked like.
Yeah, they probably would, because my hair gets all discolored from the well water, so it's like.
Oh, you told me that.
All my blonde hair kind of turns into like, I always call it like a Labrador, like kind of reddish brown, like, so it changes from that. Like it's one of those ones. If I go take a shower like in like the city for like a week or two, like it will kind of all come out, and then probably even less than that, a handful of days, and next thing you know, it'll just start stripping it out, and all those like minerals will go away, and the color will change.
What's in your water out there?
A lot of iron, a lot of other stuff too. Even though it is filtered, but it's still just hard water,
Yeah.
So,
well, the few quail water.
You can't really have a white shirt and wash it too many times in the laundry, or else it becomes like that kind of like native. Speaking of 90s, remember like that Native American like dirt orange kind of like clothing that used to exist?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what the water will pretty much turn the like white clothes into. Except it doesn't look nearly as good. It just looks. It just looks like you're wearing dirty clothes almost. Like it's just all stained.
Gosh. Well, yeah, that's one trend that could stay in the 90s. There's a lot of things that could stay in the 90s. But anyway, thank y'all for listening to the first episode of Analog Legends. I had fun. We're definitely going to do more of these. I think Tuesday's the day I'm going to look at for releases, and we'll see how that goes. But anyway, go always to oldmanorange.com. You can find all the things that Spencer does over there, Pizza Boys and, gym stuff, and, obviously Old Man Orange podcast and all things over there. And you can find me on Twitter at Via VHS or X, whatever it's called now. TikTok, go to TikTok because I'm going to be doing some VHS related stuff. And we're going to be doing all kinds of fun things. So anyway, stay tuned for more Analog Legends. Y'all have a good one, and we're out.